Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by Max Porterfield, President and CEO of Callinex Mines. And first of all, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, it's a very, very historic time, and as we speak, we are witnessing history. Gold is trading just $8 shy of all-time highs, a peak we haven't seen since 2011. This is an absolutely incredible time to be an investor in gold and silver right now. Silver has basically doubled from March lows, and I'm wondering what is causing this immense bullishness right now. FOMO, apocalyptic concerns about the dollar. I mean, what do you think is leading to this massive move?
I think it's all of the above, but certainly the stimulus package that's being taken place around the world by governments. You saw a $750 billion stimulus package announced in the EU. In the United States, they're going back and forth. The Democrats want $3 trillion. The Republicans are looking more towards $1 trillion. But all in total, I think they're stating around $7 trillion globally. So that's a huge amount of money to be printing and debt to be taken on. And with that, that's going to be extremely bullish for the precious metals like you're seeing right now. In terms of the move that you saw earlier in the year in March, something that you also saw in 2008, where all asset classes kind of correlate. You saw gold pull back. You certainly saw silver come down to roughly $12 an ounce. But then just again, you saw the reversal in that really short order as everyone has a flight to safety. I think it's a very, very bright future for the precious metals space and the metal space overall in general. While it is unfortunate everything that's kind of going on globally with the pandemic and the response to try to address that.
Well, it's nice to see a little bit of opportunity among, pretty terrible situation worldwide, and obviously we can't mince words here. I mean, it's really bad for basically everybody right now. But with this madness comes some opportunity, and I wanted to ask, considering the gold-silver ratio, how high can you see something like silver climbing through this crisis? I've heard many people mention triple digits, and I know a million people ask I'm sure, where do you see silver going in the near future? But I mean, it's something that a lot of people are wondering because we are seeing such a big move. So what about this triple digit speculation that we're seeing? Where do you see it going?
Well, I certainly think that's possible. I mean, silver's run to $50 an ounce on two different occasions. So I wouldn't put it past it doing it again. Certainly, I think the demand drivers are there. You saw a big buyer come in, the Sprott LLC, I think it was, looking to acquire 8% of annual silver supply, which quite frankly, I just don't think is possible given the supply demand fundamentals for that. So in terms of silver prices, I think they are going to trend much higher. At one point, the silver to gold ratio they mentioned too, I think got us close to nearly 140 ounces of silver to 1 ounce gold. It's since been reduced dramatically. I think it's roughly around 80 ounces silver to 1 ounce gold. I mean, it changes so quickly; it's tough to keep track minute by minute. With that being said, you're also seeing gold continue to run, and as that runs, silver will follow in lockstep. Obviously, the supply demand drivers for both those metals are a bit different. In the silver space, half of demand on an annual basis comes from industrial use, whereas another 20% is from jewelry, and historically 19% of demand has come from investment demand, and then you get silverware makes up 6%. I always like to throw in the silverware. With that being said, you're going to be having big shifts in I think the investment demand portion of that, and you're seeing that play out, I think, right now, and that's a key part of the driving force of that. I think if you look at the inflows into the silver ETF in the United States, for example, you can kind of, it's just an example of seeing that play out. I've had people call me with inability to actually get their hands on physical, and again, I think that's all indicative of the times that we're in right now. So on the supply side of things, what people may or may not realize is over the past 4 years, you've had a continually declining supply in the silver space. But when you look more closely at that and the silver production in general, 70% of silver production actually comes as a byproduct to either a lead zinc producing mine or a copper producing mine, or maybe a mix of both of those. So a big portion of silver supply is as a byproduct. So with that being said, if you look at in the middle of the pandemic, I don't know current statistics right at this very moment. I mean, things have been shifting so quickly, but at one point, you had roughly 17% of zinc supply come offline, and you also had roughly 10% of copper supply come offline. And so that's inherently going to further exacerbate, silver supply, given that a big portion of silver supply is a byproduct to these type of mines. So again, it's like a perfect storm, so to speak, for the metal, for silver in particular, and something that investors are obviously clamoring for and seeing, more recently. And certainly there was people that were bullish on silver before that.
Right. Well, Max, the dollar has rallied in tandem with gold since 2016 through 2018. And then in December 2018, the monetary U-turn began, and the Fed announced it would stop raising rates and began lowering them. With this, the dollar decoupled with gold, and gold continued to move higher while the dollar moved higher against fiat currency, but not gold. Now we see the dollar collapsing even against fiat currencies. Is this the end of the dollar bull market? And if so, what does this mean for zinc, lead, copper, and other commodities that have been in a bear market for years?
In terms of the dollar, I do think so. Absent something, unprecedented happening again, where you have a real flight to the dollar. I think that you had the flight to the dollar when everyone goes risk off. Again, that was part of when I said all assets class correlate. You saw that move out of the gold and silver space clearly into the dollar, and I think that's what drove those prices down in a short order. Longer term, though, I think the only way out of this situation is to inflate the way out of the situation, and I think that's kind of on everyone's radar at this point, which is why silver and gold have performed so well, and everyone's so bullish on them moving forward. And it's going to be great for all assets, real assets, and as you mentioned, copper, zinc, lead, because they're all primarily they're all priced in U.S. dollars. So a weaker dollar obviously would mean higher. It takes more money to purchase the same amount of metal or whatever that asset is.
And I'm seeing a lot of evidence of, the Federal Reserve is printing unbelievable amount of money into the stock market. So obviously right now we're going to witness deflation because it's not getting into the hands of the public. Once it gets into the hands of the public, I hear everyone, literally everyone that I've known over the years that have been really bullish on the stock market, despite the stock market looking good at the moment for the time being. Basically everyone's like gold, silver, precious metals. I'm hearing nonstop from some of the most respected people, I'm getting into gold, I'm getting into silver. So, I mean, do you see a steady movement? I guess some might call them collapsitarians, but even people that are very, very mainstream in the space, very much Keynesians or whatever, are saying, I'm getting into gold, I'm getting into silver. Do you see this as a recurring movement going forward?
Yeah, most certainly. I do see that. I think that, by and large, people are pretty smart, and people understand what's going on around the world with the printing, the recurrent printing. I mean, I think that's also the prevalence and rise in the cryptocurrencies. Really, why did that even get created? But at the end of the day, I think cryptocurrencies might have a place to spot in the whole mix. But reality is for thousands of years, gold and silver have been a store of value, and I don't see that changing.
Well, how does gold and silver get around the fact that, I mean, things are getting very digital, and one way or another, things will continue to get digital. We're not going back in time, but we have this historical, preservation of wealth, this wealth insurance that people have used for thousands of years. I mean, how does that play into the digital world? Because that is a question that a lot of people have been asking lately.
Well, it already has. You have the advent of the ETF. I think before the advent of the ETF, which that hasn't been around too long. The only really way for investors to play the physical without actually going out and hoarding or acquiring bullion and then putting in a vault of their own was to play the junior miners and the companies that were actively exploring, developing or mining these type of deposits. And you'd have that inherent leverage because silver prices, gold prices, whatever the underlying commodity or metal that they're mining or producing is in, as prices increase, they're going to obviously have huge increases in cash flow and margins will expand because your operating costs, absent most everything, will stay fairly flat when you have a quick, big move in the underlying commodity, which is what you're seeing today.
Well, before we get into Kallinex, I wanted to first ask, between COVID-19 and re-elections, or perhaps a massive quantitative easing, what is the biggest threat for the global economy, and how far are we from seeing the real breaking point? It seems like this is not over, or even close to over, for that matter.
Well, I'm an optimistic guy. I like to look at things optimistically. In terms of the the pandemic that we're in right now, obviously, I think that was the black swan event. But quite frankly, we were in a recession before the pandemic hit.
Right.
Everything's back looking. If you look at the data, we were heading into a recession. I personally thought, pandemic aside, that going into a presidential election year, that they're going to do everything in their power, politicians do, to have a good market going into an election cycle, and that the market was going to hold on until the election was over. And I believe that on all likelihood that Trump was going to be reelected. And I still am leaning towards that right now myself. Politics aside, I just think that's the more likely outcome given the two choices between Biden and Trump at the given time.
Yeah, it's been clear to a lot of us for a long time that we've kind of been in a recession since 2008 that's just been papered over. And I've heard a lot of people over the years say that, but we've reached the perfect catalyst. I mean, COVID-19, you cannot pick a better catalyst to bring everything down all at once. And but going forward, I mean, again, there's lots of opportunity in unfortunate situations like the collapse of a stock market or the collapse of a dollar or whatever it might be. There are a lot of opportunities going forward. So I wanted to ask you, the company that you run and manage has rallied dramatically in the past 4 months. Callinex is one of the best stocks in Canada. What is the market recognizing about Callinex Mines, and does it have to do with your surprising drill results in silver?
Yeah, most certainly. That was very surprising. And then, listen, that's why we're in the exploration business, and we're very excited about the silver that we intersected in New Brunswick. In Callinex, it was a company that we had a $35 to $60 million valuation between 2006 and 2018. We were actively grew one of our assets in New Brunswick, the Nash Creek Deposit, which is a zinc lead dominant resource there, and actually published a maiden PA in a very good zinc market. And the company kind of was branded and become known for its exposure to zinc, given those assets that we acquired and were able to develop by growing the resource and put out a public preliminary economic assessment. With that being said, within weeks of publishing that, Trump and kind of instigated this trade wars between the U.S. and China, and that's when we saw a decline in zinc prices, where zinc prices went from $1.60 a pound down to 90 cents a pound in about 3.5 months' time. And really, I think the market threw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and then that's when we had a lot of downward pressure on the company. But that never changed our ambition or objectives and what we're looking to do in growing the company. And absolutely, you're right. We did call our into 2 silver discoveries at our Nash Creek deposit. And again, that's a deposit that at today's depressed zinc lead prices shows positive economics, albeit marginal. But when we did that, it was really to take a snapshot in time to show the world and investors that Nash Creek has a future. We believe that it will become economic. And we need to have like a barometer, a time stamp in terms of what do we need to do to improve that. And it really was we need to grow the size of the resource base at Nash Creek and find additional near-surface mineralization. And so then, through that led us to doing a very district-scale IP survey, which is a good tool set that we're using in New Brunswick, and we utilized to successfully double the resource base at Nash Creek. We did that over a regional basis. We've got a very large land package at that project area. And that's when we collared into those 2 silver discoveries. And they were collared into an 18-kilometer fault. The fault is largely untested. There's one other historic drill hole that crossed the fault in our drill database that was never sampled. And then the 2 holes that we tested that recovered and came up with positive silver results were all very near surface. Over 90% of the mineralization identified in those drill holes was silver, and there was lead zinc as a byproduct of that. And they're wide open in all directions. And so that's really getting the market excited, particularly in just making that discovery that's got tremendous growth potential to them at a time where the macroeconomic factors are really in our favor. So that's, I think one of the key things is you already had a great company. I'm biased when I say that. I live and breathe Callinex. I'm a big shareholder of the company and obviously very passionate about what we do. We already had a great company with a great asset base that was being kind of out of favor, out of love. The baby got thrown out the bathwater with the whole trade war. And then we were able to make those discoveries, and we're vectoring to making a discovery in Flin Flon. We're drilling there too as well. And, you get a reevaluation, pretty dramatic, which is nice to see that our hard work and efforts paying off. But, for us, this is the beginning, and this is not the end of, our bigger objectives, because we need to drill out these discoveries and, money aside, we're doing this to really help the communities with which we operate and explore. All of them have very high unemployment rate, even before the pandemic, and desperately need discoveries because their economies are dependent on mining.
Right, right. And it's nice to hear among all of the negative news that we're witnessing on a day-to-day basis. We're just being inundated with negative news. It's nice to hear some positive news about something just beginning. And with that, I wanted to ask you, can you provide an update on Kalanick since the last time we spoke with you? What's the market cap and what does your cash and debt look like?
So as the last financials, we have $1 million in the treasury. When we're not doing any drilling, our burn's extremely low, roughly $40,000 to $50,000 a month. In terms of debt, we don't have any debt. I'm not a proponent of taking debt on a company that doesn't generate revenue. That doesn't really bode well. When you don't generate revenue, you really don't have a ability to pay off the debt. In terms of market capitalization, roughly $33 million Canadian. And one of the other things that we did last year is we consolidated the share structure. When our valuation got hit down as much as it did, we used that as an opportunity to consolidate the share structure, roll it back. I was a big buyer of the stock in the open market. We did a small financing to recapitalize it ourselves, and really we put ourselves in a position to be very successful in this year, and that's what we've seen play out, and we're very excited about it all.
I also wanted to ask you about your assets as well as how about your large shareholders?
Yeah, so in terms of our assets, the strategy of the company is doing exploration in close proximity to infrastructure. That infrastructure is obviously in place because of the geologic pedigree that has led to the infrastructure being there. Flin Flon, Manitoba, for example, where we're actively drilling. That's a camp that's been going on for over 96, 97 years of continuous production and 32 mines and counting. And right now in that community, there's a need of a new discovery, a deep need of a new discovery, because the flagship Banker mine, the 777 mine that's operated by Hudbay, is slated to close down on Q2 2022, and there's been no new discovery. So with that being said, the portfolio is structured on making discoveries in close proximity to infrastructure because that allows you to compress your upfront capital costs, which is the biggest hurdle for a deposit to be economic, is getting the people, the power, the road access, all that infrastructure out there. But when you're exploring, in Flin Flon or a Pine Bay project, we're 16 kilometers away as the crow flies. You can drive your car out there, and it's actually got advanced permitting. In the Bathurst camp of New Brunswick, we've got 3 projects. Like I mentioned, our flagship project in Bathurst is the Nash Creek project, where we've got the Nash Creek deposit, which is a PEA stage asset, and those 2 silver discoveries. And then to round out the portfolio in Newfoundland, in the Buckens camp, we have got a Point Leamington deposit, which is a historic resource right now that we're going to be updating in the very, very near future. It's a gold, zinc, copper resource that we believe can be amenable to an open pit operation. And again, the Buckens camp is another camp that's got a long production history. So those are the assets of the company. In terms of the shareholder base, I'm a big shareholder of the company. Again, I built the majority of my position last year, own roughly 4% of the company. My family is a big shareholder as well, very supportive of my career and our objectives. A Resource Capital Fund's a very well-respected private equity fund that specializes in natural resource investments, owns roughly 8% of the float. Carlos Savelli and his family office and his group of investors also own roughly just under 10% as well. So that's the largest shareholder base. And again, there's only 10.6 million shares out, and it's very, very tightly held. Our former chairman, Mike Maslowski, Canadian Mining Hall of Famer, for example, also owns 5%. So we're all believers in what we're looking to accomplish.
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask you, you did go over some of your plans going forward, but what are you most excited for going through 2020? I know it's a pretty unpredictable year, but with that said, what really stands out going through 2020 for you guys?
For the company or for the world?
Well, for the company, we could go into the world if you want, but I think that'll take a couple hours to break down. But
from the world basis, I think it's a very, very positive time. I think you're going to have a big shift in people's decisions and what's valuable to them. And I think that's kind of the shake-up the world really needed. I mean, the only way you can do that was with what we're going through right now. And I think this is going to be a big learning experience and a healing in a lot of ways for people, for businesses, or what have you. In terms of Callinex, and this is something that we were excited about last year, and this is what we've remained focused in our ambitions is we want to discover 3 camps and 3 mines in 2020. And with the discovery holes that we've announced, with already the backdrop of the Nash Creek deposit, in New Brunswick, and the two discovery holes that are very wide apart. I mean, the discovery holes are 6.8 kilometers apart along that fault. I think we're well on the way there, and we're really excited about getting back and doing work there. We're doing a soil sampling there along that trend, and then we'll be following up those discoveries with a robust drilling campaign later this year. And then in the Flin Flon camp, we spent 6 years really focused at Pine Bay to make that discovery for that community that's in a deep need of the discovery. We've got some really exceptional targets that are on a known mine horizon that we're actively drilling right now, and we're very eager to see what the results of those are. And then in Buchan's camp, again, we've got Point Leamington, which was the flagship of Newmarket Gold, which was ultimately acquired by Kirkland Lake. It was their IPO asset that we have within the portfolio. We're looking to update the resource on there. We've got targets generated there that we'll need to drill test again. And again, we're very, very excited across the portfolio to make these discoveries for our shareholder base, and obviously as well as to benefit the communities within which we're exploring.
Absolutely. Well, as always, to our viewers, it's very important that everyone does their own due diligence and looks into this for themselves. None of what we do here is investment advice, but it's great to talk to people who have great companies, and there's a lot of opportunity going forward. So I think a lot of our viewers are very happy to be able to hear from you again, because obviously you guys are growing, and obviously this is a very strange time, but there's always a little bit of opportunity in the worst situations that really optimistic things to look forward to in the future. So where can people find more information on Callinex Mines and possibly get involved or invest?
Absolutely. So you can always find us on our website at callinex.ca. That's CALLINEX.ca. Our corporate presentation, news releases, as well as our contact information is on there, and we're happy to speak with investors or shareholders at any time. And then we trade both on the United States Exchange under OTC, the ticker is CLLXF, and then in Canada on the Toronto Venture Exchange, our ticker is CNX. So that's that, and thank you again for allowing me to come back and provide an update on our milestones and accomplishments as we've reached them.
Yeah, well, it's really good to talk with you again, and you always have a lot of insight on this issue. Obviously, you're very passionate about it, and we look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
My friends, it is go time. We are completely demonetized on YouTube, and we depend on the viewer to stay alive and spread the message of freedom and truth. So check those links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribestar, anything you guys could do to help keep independent media alive helps enormously in helping spread this message to the masses. So make sure to check those links. Donate to our Bitcoin address on the screen or below. We really appreciate anything you could do to keep us alive. You could check those links below for Cointree as well, where you can find other cryptocurrencies that you can donate and keep WAM alive. Find us on flote.app, flote.app, as well as BitChute and LBRY and Mines. We're on all the other platforms. We are leaving YouTube soon, so make sure to find us at those sites, because it's the only way we can keep talking to you, the masses, the great people that actually care about the future of free humanity. Also, join our new newsletter at www.iamband.com. Anything helps at this point, guys. We need to support free information online. This is the most difficult time in our history, and it takes a lot of hard work to keep our message alive in the face of great evils that have taken over the propaganda news on television as well as on YouTube, where YouTube decides what you can or cannot see. We need your help, my friends. So I really appreciate anything you guys can do. Check those links. There's many ways you can help. Until next time, though, thanks, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.